are almost finished with the sculpture. There are some little rough spots that we're going to be cleaning up, but I am going to be cutting it in half. And that's the thing. I don't even know if I need to, but I think I am, just so it's a lot easier to fire. And since that's what I told you guys in the beginning that I was going to do, that's what I'm going to try and do. And you can use this sort of technique for future sculptures because often it's a good practice to have. And since most of the proportions are already done, all you really have to do is give it some details, and you don't even need the entire body in there. What you might want to do is create registration marks. So we are going to be splitting it underneath the arm. I think that's going to be the easiest thing. And then I'm going to clean up where this goes into the lower back. Otherwise, there's going to be like a bunch of things in there that you don't want. But it's better to be done now. But every time I look at the sculpture, I'm always like, I need to continue working on it over and over. And this is a problem that happens, at least for me, because I'm always interested in kind of like finessing and fixing things. And if I don't stop, then I'll never stop. And since this is water-based clay, it tends to be a little bit harder to use in the long run. Otherwise, the sculpture is going to be always getting way too hard. But I think I'm pretty much ready to move on to another sculpture. You don't have to keep working on the same one over and over. And I like to, almost have a little bit of a rougher sort of style. With the oil-based clay, you can really push it to the limit as far as realism, but I do find that I do like this sort of a little bit looser form of sculpture. So even after this is dry, you can keep working on it. But this cloth works really well because I can just look for some of the imperfections, and even if I give it a little bit of a texture, you're not going to see it if you are looking from your vantage point. So it doesn't really matter. And I think a lot of people get carried away with creating a very polished surface. Like you don't even need to create a lot of details. Oftentimes it's better just to kind of leave things a little bit less perfect. But this was a very fun sculpture to do, and I learned a lot doing this. I've done sculptures in the past, standing sculptures in terracotta. That's why I know it's possible to do this, but a lot of people would shy away from terracotta for standing sculptures, and I can't say I blame them, because it does create a little bit of a more difficult way of sculpting. One of the artists I really like, his terracottas, his name is Philippe Farut, and if you look him up online, you'll see some amazing works. The guy has been doing sculpture for a very long time. I believe he lives in France somewhere, and the way he does it, he actually puts an armature inside the clay, and then he individually cuts it out, and I think it's that's way too much work for me. I prefer things to be a little bit more direct. And in painting, you have a different style of painting. There's the people that do neoclassical sort of painting that involves layers, and then there's the type of painters that they paint in alla prima. It's like a very direct way of sculpting, and that's the way I kind of painting. But that's what I think about when I think of this form of sculpture. This is a very direct way of sculpting. There's no mold, so whatever I touch, that is what the artist touched. When you look at sculptures of Rodin in the National Gallery, for example, there's a lot of terracottas, and the cool thing about those is that is the artist that actually touches those. It's not so much so with the marble, because oftentimes with marble carvings, it's their students, it's like a whole array of students that work on those. But with the terracottas, and it's just the most direct way of sculpting, I believe. no mold needed, and even with some of Da Vinci's sculptures and Verrocchio sculptures, the terracottas are exactly what he touched, so it gives it a different thing altogether. It's a very direct way of connecting to the artist. So in this session, I think I'm just going to be straightening these things out, just because, and the way I'm doing it with my finger, if you pay attention, I am moving along the direction of the legs. And if you know where the muscles are, then you can kind of push down a little bit and help that form go. But don't make it overly smooth. I think that's one thing I don't like about sculptures, is that I think artists, they make it a little bit too smooth throughout. So if I make the knee just a little bit too smooth, I might indicate where the patella is and just create a little bit of an edge, and kind of take my finger and just kind of push it where I want. I much prefer that. So I'm gonna, and of course for this sort of sculpture, a brush, some water, and the parts that you can't get to, you can use the brush to move them around. And this is a very good sort of clay for this. The wetter it is, the more you get to move it. But it is time for me to slice this thing, and it's going to be a little hectic, a little difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wire tool and I'm going to bring it around the back here, and I need to figure out where exactly I'm going to be doing it. But, alright, so, and the clay is already a little bit hard, but okay, here we go. So if I just move this wire like this and I crisscross it, okay, there we go. And that's it, look at that, it's hanging. Now we have to push this out, and that's the good thing about this little contraption. And look at this, we have, so there we go, guys. It was surprisingly easy to do that, and yeah, you know, you're working really hard on this, and then you have it in two pieces, and it might seem like it's a crazy thing, and be careful, I don't want to slide this. So now I have to remove this out. Is really in there. There we go. So that is, you have to be very careful because this is kind of just dangling there. So, see if I can cover it. But because this clay that I'm adding is a lot softer than what is there, I think what happens is that it's going to dry at a different rate, and that's not going to be good. But I still don't mind too much. With this serrated tool, you can work and smooth out the clay bits. These scraping tools, and we're going to remove as much clay as we can from here. Remember, this is not very stable because we don't have a anything holding it now. So, and you don't want to hit this table, but your tool like this and just kind of moving it, you do dig pretty deep. We just want to remove as much as we can. Kind of just takes a lot of time. The base is pretty solid, as you can tell, and I'm just going to start removing. And you can see the holes from the the armature there. Do that afterwards. So this is what I have so far. I have the two sculptures in two parts, and I'm not even going to cover it now. I'm going to let it dry. I can always dig out a little bit, even if it dries completely, just by using like a drill and by removing and drilling up to the parts that I want. But the one thing to note is that this part is attached to the base, not with anything, just because it's so wet down here. There's a lot more stuff here, and I am going to let it dry. It's going to separate from this. I don't want to start like lifting it up because it's so small here, and the drapery here is just meant for support of the legs. I could remove it, but I'm just going to keep it that way. And really what I want is the base to kind of separate from the plastic. That's why I put the plastic here, so it doesn't, the water doesn't seep into the wooden base, because it would be a lot harder to separate. You take it to a kiln place, they usually charge you by the weight anyway, so you're better off digging out all of this as much as possible. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.